real significance of this first summit is that it is happening at all.
It's also the kind of music that's all over the internet in MP3 format.
There are also healthcare workers and civil servants here angry about budget cuts and worried about their jobs.
Organizers of today's protests say it's obvious Harris hasn't gotten the message.
Chill, freezing genetically modified foods out of Europe could be setting in.
The land giveaway
here.
grows. It's become an issue raised at international summits.
Hi, I'm Knowlton Nash, and on this edition of CBC News in Review, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who captured the imagination of Canadians like no prime minister before him and became an international symbol of a new, vibrant and exciting Canada, dies at the age of 80. It was once one of Canada's biggest accomplishments, our national health care system. But in recent years, with government funding cuts, it has become one of our biggest worries. Can billions of dollars from the federal government save one of the pillars of Canada's caring society? The scenes of domestic violence are stark and ugly. A murdered woman, sometimes along with her children and the man who killed them. Murder and suicide. The unanswered questions always remain. Why wasn't it prevented? How did society fail the victims? What's a better way to stop the violence? Childhood is supposed to be about growing up, learning, and having fun. But in recent years, in war situations around the world, it has meant terror and violence for children. Killed, maimed, made orphans, and even forced to fight as soldiers. He was the man who captivated the nation, whether chartering a new course for Canada, making tough political decisions, or dancing with a glamorous movie star. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was always in the limelight, always with dash, flair, and a special touch. Trudeau died on September 28th after battling Parkinson's disease and prostate cancer. He was 80. An intellectual who exuded class, Trudeau served more than 15 years as Prime Minister. He brought the Canadian Constitution home from Britain and enshrined within it this country's far-reaching Charter of Rights. At his death, most Canadians remember him with affection and nostalgia. Some believe he was this country's greatest Prime Minister ever. Even those who disagreed with his policies now speak highly of the sense of excitement and purpose he brought to Canada. In an unprecedented show of respect, loss, and emotion, more than 50,000 turned out at the Parliament buildings in Ottawa, where Trudeau's body lay in state. The CBC's Susan Bonner has this report on a weekend of mourning.
They came by the thousands. All day, any way it took to bring them here. They came with food, something to read, cameras, and roses. So many roses. Bill Woodley made the trip for himself and 3 friends.
I've come down from Burlington for the day to do this, and they weren't able to come along, and the final one was for me. And I'll be taking 1 petal from each rose back for them to remember Pierre Trudeau by and to remember this day by.
How much are these? A few blocks away at Ottawa's Byward Market, buckets of roses awaited buyers, like Michelle Boussière and Louise Lalonde, who planned their own tribute to Pierre Trudeau.
I recall that when I was, I believe in grade 5, he became the Prime Minister, and when he retired, I was practically out of graduate school. And during that time, I think our collective psyche really woke up as a nation. I think he is inexorably associated with that in our minds.
Their first stop, the Centennial Flame, what's become a shrine to Pierre Trudeau. Boussière takes off his Canada pin to include with the flowers.
Bless you, Pierre.
Among ordinary Canadians, extraordinary moments. Malik Karsh, a photographer world famous for his shots of tulips in the Canadian capital, focuses now on the roses.
This is a great event, and this is a picture that probably should go in one of my future books. Here we had one of the greatest statesmen and prime ministers that Canada has produced.
Paul Conley spontaneously jumped on a plane from British Columbia to be here.
I just felt that I should be here. I was exercising early Saturday morning at the Y in Victoria, and I said I should be there in Ottawa to pay tribute as one more Canadian to a far greater Canadian than each of us.
And the lineup, laced with thousands of stories. People waiting up to 5 hours in the heat with small, often bored children for their chance inside. Charles Dixon brought the whole family.
He'll be reading about him in the history books. And I suppose it's not likely that he would have much of a memory of this day, but maybe the older kids would.
Inside, before the casket, silence and symbol. At one point this evening, Trudeau's former wife, Margaret, returned briefly. But mostly today was about people like Susan Cora.
I'm very, very sad. It's the end of an era. He let people that look like me come into the country and have equal rights.
Into the evening, they kept arriving. The twilight of an incredible 2 days where people, not politics, took over Parliament Hill. Here, at the place which is the very center of the country's political life, the people simply came to say goodbye.
More homage was paid to Trudeau as the train carrying his body made its way from Ottawa to Montreal. Then the funeral at Notre Dame Basilica. Representatives from foreign countries, political leaders, celebrities from all walks of life, and Montrealers themselves, a last chance to say goodbye.
Pierre Elliott Trudeau. The very words convey so many things to so many people. Statesman, intellectual, professor, adversary, outdoorsman, lawyer, journalist, author, and prime minister. More than anything, to me, he was Dad. And what a dad. He gave us a lot of tools. We were taught to take nothing for granted. He doted on us, but didn't indulge. Many people say he didn't suffer fools gladly. But I'll have you know he had infinite patience with us. He encouraged us to push ourselves, to test limits, to challenge anyone and anything. But there were certain basic principles that could never be compromised. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. He has kept his promises and earned his sleep. Je t'aime, Papa.
The CBC looks back at the man who personified a new Canada for so many.
Pierre Trudeau burst into national prominence. He had a flair for getting attention. Nothing about him was drab. He left no one indifferent. Pierre Trudeau was Canada's first political media star. He had a great intellect, and he was intellectually daring, prepared to break political tradition.
The view we take here is that there's no place for the state in the bedrooms of the nation.
Television and Trudeau-mania gave him the Prime Minister's job at the Liberal Leadership Convention in 1968. There is no other way to explain his victory. Not only had he been a Liberal outsider, for years he had been a biting critic of the Liberal Party, but nothing could stop the magic.
Canada must be unified. Canada must be one. Canada must be progressive. And Canada must be a just society.
On the eve of the federal election in 1968, Trudeau stood his ground against rock-throwing separatists in Montreal. It helped him win a handsome majority, but his battle with the separatists was about to become a dark signpost of Canadian history.
I want to express to Mrs. Laporte and to Mr. Laporte's family the very deep regrets of the Canadian people, of the Canadian government.
Days before the Quebec Labour Minister was murdered by FLQ terrorists, Trudeau had implemented the War Measures Act. And as hundreds of innocent Quebecers were rounded up and jailed, questions were raised then and since about Trudeau's libertarian principles.
It's more important to keep law and order in this society than to be worried about weak-kneed people who don't like the looks of a
At any
family.
cost? At any cost? How far would you go with that? How far would you extend that?
Well, just watch me.
His personal life also brought shocks and surprises. In '71, he married Margaret Sinclair, a woman 30 years younger than him. In short order, they had 3 sons, but the stormy marriage didn't survive the decade. And Trudeau's first majority government barely survived the '72 election. Much of the country was angry with him over official bilingualism. Voters targeted him on many fronts. Trudeau-mania had gone sour.
Don't ask me questions if you don't want my answers, you creep.
After leading a minority government, Trudeau came back with another majority in 1974. He did it by ridiculing the Conservatives' promise to impose wage and price controls. But soon after winning that '74 election, Trudeau imposed the very wage and price controls he promised he wouldn't. That big broken promise also became part of the legacy.
We must have a major reordering of government priorities.
In the mid-'70s, inflation was out of control. So was government spending. This was the beginning of deficit financing, the beginning of burdensome debt. When it came to economic management, the ledger shows Pierre Trudeau a failure. And his dream of a united bilingual Canada risks being a huge failure as well, when in 1976, René Lévesque took the separatists to power for the first time in history. To make matters worse for Trudeau, a year before the first Quebec referendum in 1980, Joe Clark defeated him. The Conservatives were in power, and it looked like Trudeau was finished.
I'm stepping down from the leadership.
But just 9 months later, when the Clark government was defeated, just weeks after Trudeau resigned, Trudeau undid his resignation and glided his way back to 24 Sussex with another majority government.
Well, welcome to the 1980s.
Trudeau took his second chance to defeat the separatists. He was a very present and forceful figure in the 1980 referendum. He was also the undisputed winner.
Puis mon nom est québécois, mon nom est canadien aussi. Puis c'est ça mon nom.
With his second chance, and surely his last chance, Trudeau used his last mandate amid much protest to patriate the Constitution, a deal which included the Charter of Rights.
Maybe second thoughts and further events will make them understand that this could have incalculable consequences.
But Quebec refused to sign, and Trudeau's dream constitution has always been marred by Quebec's isolation. In his last mandate, Trudeau further isolated Western Canada with the National Energy Program. During his last years in office, there were huge demonstrations against interest rates which exceeded 20%, Unemployment ballooned over 12%. Domestic disappointments aside, internationally, Canadians were proud of Trudeau's dashing image in the world. He danced with Arabian princes in the desert. He went to see Fidel Castro, and the Americans hated that. He never hid his displeasure for Ronald Reagan and everything Reaganomics stood for. In retirement, Trudeau's only political involvement was his opposition to the Meech Lake and Charlottetown constitutional agreements. His influence was significant, as both were defeated.
I think we have to realize that Canada is not immortal. But if it's going to go, let it go with a bang rather than with a whimper.
In recent years, Canadians saw him grieve the tragic death of his youngest son, Michel, in an avalanche. Friends would say Trudeau was never the same again.
How come you're so...
On his 80th birthday in late 1999, the dashing look was there, but little else of his former self.
Thank you. What are you photographing?
This is CBC News One.
Well, I'm
But as always, filled with surprises, Trudeau put on a little show for the camera on his 80th birthday. In old age, he displayed the same playful mischief he had all his life. Always something a little extra, a little different. Pierre Trudeau will be remembered for his strength of character, his intellect, and his pursuit of the multiracial, bilingual, united Canada he dreamed of. Jason Moskowitz, CBC News.
Public opinion poll after poll shows it. Newspaper headlines scream it. Canadians care and worry about their healthcare system. For the majority, in fact, it's their #1 priority, more important than things like tax cuts or economic growth.
You're going to have to open up now. They are.
For about 35 years now, Medicare, as it's known, has guaranteed that all of us have free access to any medically necessary treatment, no matter where we live. But these days, Canadians are frustrated, worried, and angry that our healthcare system is falling apart. These paramedics are dealing with a problem that's come to symbolize a system in crisis. Their patient needs to go to a hospital. Trouble is, all the nearby emergency rooms are so full, they're telling ambulances to go elsewhere.
Coordinators just checked with all hospitals in the city. Nobody has any stretchers, so you can just go to the closest hospital.
I would say it happens quite often, actually. Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised, especially working downtown on the corridor where there's so many hospitals, and yet they're all busy.
In some cases, it's a matter of life or death. On a January night this year, 18-year-old Joshua Fluling of Toronto suffered an asthma attack so severe he went into cardiac arrest. The nearest ER, 5 minutes from home, was jammed and closed to ambulances. So he was taken to one 18 minutes from home, where he later died.
Can I ask you just to raise both your arms up in the air for me?
One reason hospitals are so full, not enough family doctors.
Could you please tell me if Dr. Stoker's taken any new patients?
Not at this time, no.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
So many people, especially in rural areas, are heading to emergency rooms with routine problems.
My son got hurt on New Year's Eve day and jumping on a bed, cut his head open, typical 10-year-old, and is still getting very, very severe headaches. And I have no doctor, so I can't go and ask them what's happening, so I have to bring him here.
Others occupy acute care beds when they could be cared for at home if there were home care available.
It's the waiting game where I'm going to go to find out where I'm going to go or when something can come available.
There are a lot of people that we admit to hospital because we don't have other resources that we can tap into.
Still others have to travel south because waiting lists are just too long in many parts of this country.
I hope if it comes again that they'll be able to treat me in Toronto and there won't be any more long waits.
The lack of resources is also taking its toll on the front lines, where doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals have seen their workloads increase with only small or no increases in their salaries. In many provinces, they've walked out in protest.
Back my healthcare to me.
It's all very troubling for Canadians who want to make sure their healthcare system not only gets better now, but that it will be there for them in the future as the population ages.
Canadians look to the future and they go, we know that we're going to have about twice as many people that fall into the senior category over the next 20 years. And they look at that and they go, boy, that's going to put enormous pressures on the healthcare system.
Under the Canadian Medicare system, it's up to the provinces to manage, pay for, and deliver health services. But they have to do all that while following a set of national standards and principles. Those are set by the federal government in something called the Canada Health Act. As well, Ottawa helps pay for health care by taking a portion of our federal taxes and giving it to the provinces. These are called transfer payments. A big reason for the health care crisis: since the mid-90s, Ottawa has been cutting transfer payments in an effort to cut its own debts. In 1995, federal transfers totaled close to $30 billion. By 1998, they dropped 17% to around $25 billion. All this as the cost of health care, of drugs and equipment soared, and as most provincial governments, also struggling with mounting debts of their own, cut their own health care contributions. This year, with the federal government's deficit turning into huge surpluses, Ottawa finally agreed it was time to put a lot of money back into health care. But how much and under what conditions? Just what kind of a role should the federal government play? It was shaping up as a battle over both funding and control, another round in an old Canadian fight. Here's the CBC's Christine Crowther with a quick history lesson.
A new budget, an old argument.
We will increase funding for post-secondary education and health care.
On health care, it's a disaster.
Indeed, last year for health care alone, we made the single largest investment in this government's history.
Either private sector is going to have to pay more, individuals are going to have to pay more, or somehow or other we can run this system on far fewer dollars than we have today.
They're both being very creative in their use of numbers.
Reza Dieber has spent a lot of time getting to know the numbers. She teaches health administration at the University of Toronto. She's also one of the people providing information for a Senate committee's new study of the federal government's role in health care. She admits that one of the hardest things to do is figure out how much money Ottawa is spending on health.
Part of the trouble is that since 1977, federal transfers for health care are not really for health care. There's no such thing as federal money for health care.
In order to understand the system, you've got to go right back to Canada's early days. Now, the only mention that the Fathers of Confederation make with respect to health care comes in the section of the Constitution that deals with provincial responsibilities. In it, it says that the provinces are responsible for the establishment, maintenance, and management of hospitals, asylums, and charities.
This next great forward step.
Tommy Douglas brought in health insurance for Saskatchewan hospitals in 1947. 10 years later, Ottawa decided it too would get involved. It shared half the costs of hospital care with the provinces. In 1966, Parliament passed legislation that saw the federal government also share half the amount the provinces were spending on doctors. And Medicare was born. Everything changed, though, during the Trudeau years. 1977, Ottawa was getting worried about how fast healthcare costs were growing. The provinces didn't like the federal government telling them how to run their healthcare systems. So they reached a new deal. Now the amount that Ottawa gave the provinces for health and education was pooled. There was an understanding that money would be used for health and education, but there was no requirement. The provinces could use the money as they saw fit. There was also a new equation. Starting in 1977, Ottawa put up its normal 50%. The deal was that after that, the federal contribution was supposed to grow with gross national product and population. The big difference was Ottawa was no longer tied to funding half the costs of health care, something that soon became a concern to some provinces. Michael Decter was Manitoba's top civil servant in the early 80s.
Well, I think you could see by the recession of the early 80s that the provinces were having great difficulty in controlling the growth in health spending. It was running double digit, and their revenues were shrinking or not growing. And so the provinces were on the hook for a bigger and bigger chunk of the healthcare spending.
The Mulroney years saw another change, but this time it wasn't a mutual decision. In 1986, the Conservatives decided to cut the growth in transfers by 2%.
This is going to be a difficult year in the economy as we...
By the end of their term in government, the Tories froze the amount of money they were putting into the Education and Health Fund. By the time the Liberals came to power, there were calls for change. Paul Martin answered in 1995.
We will never secure the kind of structural change that we need without reforming the system of transfers to the provinces. This budget sets out some key parameters.
The new plan was the Canada Health and Social Transfer. The feds told the provinces they were putting social assistance into the same pool as education and health. The downside for the provinces was that it didn't put any extra money into the pool to compensate. So how much is Ottawa actually spending on health care? Well, according to a report from the Auditor General last fall, the federal government is not in a position to determine what its total contribution to health care really is. But people who believe their health care system is falling apart don't really care who fixes things, they just want them fixed. And that's the political dilemma for both Ottawa and the provinces. It's also the reason there's once again talk of a new deal.
A new deal, and one where Ottawa wanted a new say in how healthcare money is spent. The federal government talked of an ambitious plan to trade money and programs for a larger role in the healthcare sector. That included a national report card system, one that would keep tabs on how each province manages the health of its citizens, and one that would allow the public to compare the quality of care. But the provinces didn't like it. With the federal government paying so little for health care, they argued, where did it get off telling them what to do? That was Alberta Premier Ralph Klein's argument.
Sir, the federal government contributes less than 13 cents of every dollar Alberta spends on health care. Somebody who pays that small a percentage of the trip cannot demand the right to give directions.
Alberta Premier Ralph Klein made that statement as he introduced a controversial plan, a decision to let private clinics handle some surgeries. It was a way, he said, of taking some of the pressure off the public system. And he said it was not putting Medicare in danger because the government would still be paying the bill. But as Paul Hunter reports, many Canadians saw it as a dangerous step down the road to privatization.
No, no, 1,000 times no.
Day after day, demonstrators have rallied outside the Alberta legislature against plans to privatize health care in this province. Today, their message seemed more urgent than usual. Inside the legislature, the government was tabling a bill critics say could change health care in this country forever.
Queue jumping will be illegal. Mr. Speaker.
Bill 11, as it's called, steps up a move in Alberta to have sick people get their health care at privately owned, for-profit clinics instead of at public hospitals. The bill, the first of its kind in Canada, would allow such clinics to offer a range of minor surgeries, even those involving overnight stays, all paid for by Medicare. But it specifically bans the creation of private hospitals. And it prohibits so-called queue jumping, in which a patient would pay money to go to the front of the waiting list for a particular procedure.
This bill isn't worth the paper it was printed on.
The Liberal opposition calls it a Trojan horse, saying there's no way to enforce the queue jumping ban and will lead to a system where the rich get better care than the poor.
This legislation sets up private hospitals in this province. They're going to be called approved surgical facilities. They are private hospitals.
The only thing that this bill prevents a private hospital from doing is providing emergency services. And you know why? That's not profitable.
Now they want to spend your tax dollars on for-profit hospitals.
It's a battle that's been fought for months in Alberta. TV ads against the move, and studies like this one, released by a health economist this morning, suggesting it turns doctors into persuasive retailers. But Alberta's premier, who says this is all simply to ease hospital waiting lists, isn't worried.
Bill 11 commits us to the principles of the Canada Health Act. Whatever happens will happen within the framework of those principles.
Despite the opposition, Bill 11 was eventually passed, and the nation's focus returned to the federal government's push for health care reform. There were months of meetings and negotiations to try to reach some agreement. All of it culminated in September at 24 Sussex Drive. Canada's first ministers gathered for a face-to-face discussion around the dinner table, but they still had different agendas. The federal government looking for a bigger role and reform, the provinces really only interested in more money.
I think a deal's possible, but there are some fault lines, potentially some pretty tough fault lines.
I'm still unsure of what the commitments are going to be and what the investments will be.
I would find it incredible that first ministers would come to this meeting knowing how Canadians feel about health care and not achieve an agreement.
After more hard bargaining, a deal was finally reached, but only after Ottawa dropped its demands for any real reform of the healthcare system. Susan Harada reports.
The relief was palpable. After the public bickering, the name-calling, the political bluster, the Prime Minister and the Premiers were finally able to announce an agreement.
It's a great day for all of us, and it's very important for the people in the healthcare programs of Canada.
The federal government gave the provinces money, lots of it, though not as much as they'd hoped, leaving them satisfied but not overjoyed. Here's what they'll get. In the next fiscal year, an extra $2.8 billion for a total of $18.3 billion. Not quite the $18.7 billion they wanted, the amount they got 6 years ago before federal budget cuts. That figure, though, will rise each year for 5 years until it hits $21 billion a year.
There is significant money. One is never happy with the amount one gets. One always wants more.
There will be more. An extra $1 billion over 2 years, so provinces can buy new medical equipment such as magnetic resonance imaging machines. Another $500 million to invest in new information technologies, for example, to computerize patient records. And $800 million over 4 years to explore ways of improving frontline care such as emergency services. Premiers described today's health care agreement as a good start.
In terms of patients in the hospitals, the most important part is that this gives us the ability to start rebuilding the healthcare system.
Hi, we really need to move some people.
But in hospitals that will eventually see some of the new money, they're not thinking about rebuilding yet. They're worried about trying to maintain what they have right now.
Anybody who's used the services knows we're in a crisis. Everything from the floor doesn't get cleaned enough to how come I'm waiting 3 hours to get seen by a doctor.
You don't turn the ship around in 24 hours. I think people will see greater stability in the healthcare system over the next period of time.
When the dust settled, the questions began. Was the New Deal on health care just a Band-Aid solution? Was it enough to guarantee no more crowded emergency rooms or hospital waiting lists? What about home care and drug costs and creeping privatization? Where was the long-term strategy? Those are the kinds of issues the experts and the politicians will grapple with. For most Canadians, the real question may be whether the infusion of billions of dollars by the federal government will lead to a health care system Canadians can be proud of again, or something they will still have to worry about. The issue of domestic violence is a difficult and disturbing one, highlighted recently by a number of brutal murders in Canada, killings in which the victims were women, and in one horrible case, 4 small children. It's the sad story of the Luft family, a father, mother, and 4 children found dead in July inside their home in Kitchener, Ontario.
Clearly a child's home, seemingly calm. Then, from this house, a morning call to police. Please help. Someone's hurt. An injury was all they had to go on. Instead, inside, 6 bodies, including 4 small children, one just 3 months old.
Certainly when you have 6 people dead in this house, I'd certainly classify it as not only a very bad murder, but a very unfortunate tragedy.
That hardly touches it.
I knew the kids, and they were always at my house playing. They were just there last night.
A friendly family in a working-class neighborhood. People here just spent the day wandering and wondering. Police could tell them very little, except that they are not looking for suspects. It's obviously far too early for conclusions, but rightly or wrongly, people in this neighborhood have already started saying things like it's just more domestic violence. And here we go again. They talk of police making repeated visits to this house.
3 weeks ago, they was here 2-3 times. In the same day, they came by. But I don't know what's going on.
They talk, too, of a restraining order placed against a family member who was a threat. The courts did reportedly seal a document today about this family, but police won't explain. Explaining is still a long way away.
The police were soon able to figure out that Bill Luft killed his family, then committed suicide. It may seem impossible to determine why Bill Luft would kill not only his wife, but also 4 innocent children. But there's another question that must be answered. Could the killings have been prevented? Could someone, a social agency perhaps, or the police, somehow saved the Lufts? That is the obvious question in another recent tragedy. It happened in Pickering, Ontario. A distraught woman ran from her house to hand her 10-month-old son to a neighbor. She was dragged back into her house, where she was killed by a man who then killed himself. The killer, her husband, who disobeyed a court order to stay away from his wife. The Pickering murder is eerily familiar, especially in Ontario. It reminded people of the death of Arlene May 2 years ago in Collingwood. She was killed by an ex-boyfriend after repeated threats. He'd been arrested 4 times on charges, including stalking and attempted murder. An inquest into May's murder made 200 recommendations.
Arlene May knew she was going to be killed, and she told many people, including the police. She gave them a chilling statement on videotape in November 1995, 5 months before she was murdered. In it, she spoke of the violence she suffered at the hands of her former boyfriend, Randy Isles. He said he's gonna blow my brains out. And I said, I'm going home to call the police. And he said, yeah, if you do that, I'll be right behind you. And then, I'm tired of you stalking me, harassing me. If you want to blow my brains out, do it. And Isles did just that, shooting her at her home in Collingwood and then turning the shotgun on himself. For 4 months, an inquest has looked into how this could have happened, how Randy Isles could have been arrested and released on bail 4 times for stalking, assault, and even attempted murder. Today, the coroner's jury came out with more than 200 recommendations. Some of the key ones: more protection and assistance for victims, more services that specialize in this kind of abuse, and more leeway for police to confiscate firearms. Just days before she died, Arlene May wrote out a will, giving custody of her youngest child to her eldest, Pauline. She now believes her mother's death may not have been in vain.
Just hope that these recommendations help women in the future, and that people are aware of that these things do go on, and that these men should be penalized.
But an official with the province claims a lot has already been done.
That much of the work that is to be considered now to be undertaken is already underway. And that the Attorney General has, I think, again, by reference to the evidence, taken a leadership role in this country in terms of dealing with domestic violence.
As disturbing as all these stories are, there is some good news. For years now, Statistics Canada has reported a steady trend down in domestic violence. Between 1978 and 1997, there was a 36% drop in the rate of women killed by their male partners. During all those years, the rate was at its lowest in 1996, but that was also a year which saw the worst single case of domestic violence this country has ever seen. It happened on April 5th, 1996, in Vernon, British Columbia. 9 members of one family were killed as they prepared for a wedding. They were slaughtered by the estranged husband of one of the daughters. The killer then killed himself.
For these high school students, it was a small gesture of mourning, a tribute to their classmate and 8 other members of the Gacall family.
She was she's a very good friend.
All day, neighbors and friends arrived at the house, quietly placing flowers on the blood-stained driveway. For Monica Martinez, it was especially painful. She'd spent months helping her friend Balwinder prepare for what would have been her wedding day.
What did you write on that note with the flowers?
Oh, I just put there's not enough tears in this world to deal with the sadness that everyone feels.
Belwinder was one of 6 children in the Gakhal family, shown here in an old photograph. The entire family died in the shooting. 3 children and a 60-year-old woman escaped. Police say the gunman was the estranged husband of this sister, Rajwar. Police say she had moved home with her parents after filing an abuse complaint against her husband.
Certainly the motive that we're pursuing, and the most logical one is that he chose that time to take revenge on the entire family as well as his ex-wife.
Police say the gunman, 30-year-old Mark Jahal, clearly planned the shooting. Jahal committed suicide in a local motel shortly after the shooting, but police say he originally seemed to be planning to escape.
It's fairly safe to assume that he was planning to come up, commit the murders, and leave the area and not commit suicide.
Jahal lived in this apartment in Burnaby. A neighbor remembered seeing him and his wife together last year.
He looked like he was totally in charge. She couldn't say word one. It was like, I mean, even if she looked up one time, I was talking, she kind of looked, and he just looked at her. Like, don't you dare even try and speak to her. Like, that's the way he was with her.
Almost immediately, people wondered how Mark Jahal was able to get the guns he used to kill 9 people. The simplest answer is because he had no criminal record. But Jahal had a history of abusing his wife and threatening her and her family. His estranged wife had filed a complaint with police, although she didn't want them to proceed with the charges. In the end, the police file was misplaced, and Jahal got his guns. An inquest was held.
Ever since the April massacre in Vernon, a key question has been whether Canada's supposedly strict gun laws are working. Mark Jahal was in a bitter divorce battle, and he repeatedly threatened his wife and her family. But still, he was allowed to carry guns legally. In fact, the RCMP officer who gave Jahal his gun permit says he had no option.
Under the guidelines that I was operating under at the time, I really had no alternative but to approve the application.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I stand by my decision. It was the correct decision to make at the time.
Corporal West says he had only allegations against Jahal, no proof. Now, BC's chief firearms officer has told the Vernon inquest that those guidelines are changing.
My belief is that the policy, the new policy, if applied, would certainly have given the firearms officer more substantial grounds to make a decision to deny the permit, yes.
BC's new policy requires police to consult the spouse if an applicant for a gun permit is involved in a domestic dispute. It also says police may revoke a gun license if the holder utters threats, even if there's no conviction. BC also wants a new Canada-wide policy to ensure that domestic disputes show up on police computer checks, even if there's no conviction. But the new policy does not change the basic rules set out in Canada's criminal code. That remains the same.
The criteria on which you're allowed to deny hasn't changed.
Not been changed.
So the same thing could happen again, couldn't it?
I guess it could.
The new policy, then, basically just requires police to be tougher about applying the old policy. But none of this addresses the sheer bureaucratic bungling that has emerged at the inquest here. It turns out that on 2 occasions, Mark Jahal could have been charged with uttering death threats. But in one case, the Abbotsford police dropped the complaint, and in another, the Vernon RCMP just filed it away without even reading it. There's no new policy dealing with either problem.
The coroner's jury made 29 recommendations. It said police should fully investigate all complaints of abuse or threats involving women in relationships, even if the woman doesn't want charges laid. Governments have tried many other ideas to reduce domestic violence.
A summer marred by domestic violence.
We had some terrible incidents, tragic incidents this summer, which certainly add impetus to the emergency nature of this bill.
A bill that's a get-tough approach to domestic violence. If passed, restraining orders would be replaced with intervention orders and be enforced under the criminal code, which would raise the stakes for those who break them.
That would, of course, result, as indicated, where there's a conviction with a criminal record. This would result in alleged abusers being detained also or released on a wider range of conditions.
The bill would also offer victims around-the-clock access to getting an intervention order. Women advocates here aren't opposed to the bill, but they wanted to see more money for shelters and community support services, the key, they say, to preventing domestic violence.
What we want to put in place are supports for women to take action themselves at a time when they may, in fact, be able to prevent those injuries.
We've seen with the murders this summer, many of the men actually committed suicide afterwards. Are they going to worry about the consequences of some family law restraining order?
The images of war are ingrained in our minds. Soldiers, tanks, fighter planes and bombers, massive battles between large armies, all involved in struggles of life and death, right and wrong. But during the past decade, there is another grimmer reality involving children as victims of war. The statistics are overwhelming. The estimates for 10 years are 2 million children slaughtered, 6 million disabled, and 300,000, some as young as 8 years old, forced to fight and sometimes die as soldiers. These statistics don't tell the real story on the ground, what it means to be a child caught in the midst of violence and war and death. CBC Winnipeg's Diane Swain prepared this report on 4 children trapped in the vicious civil war in the West African country of Sierra Leone.
These are the eyes of Mariatu Touré, the eyes of her brother, Mohammed, the eyes of their sister, Esther. Their eyes strain not to see, not to picture the images that lie in their memories. Images created in Sierra Leone, when their childhoods ended forever.
But I don't even want to talk about it because it's too painful for me. I'm too small.
The war in Sierra Leone, the rebels and government fighting for control, it had been building for years. The Tourés lived in a village on the outskirts of Freetown. Esther dreamed of becoming a doctor. Mariatu, a lawyer. Mohammed, the eldest child, was allowed to indulge his passions. A love of soccer. And like his father, an interest in politics.
I'm fortunate to be a member of a Student Representative Council. So we were opposing the rebels. Okay, even the time the junta overthrown, we were going on the wire, saying all sort of talks about them.
And now the people that you've been opposing.
Now they have come.
They came on January 6, 1999. They unleashed terrible violence.
The attack, I mean, they started shooting sporadically everywhere. Parents were not able to control their children again. Everybody is going up and down like that.
With thousands of others, the Tourés were herded into a soccer stadium. Echoes of cheers dissolved into brutality.
They took us to the stadium, and then they killed our father.
Then they gave our mother in front of us.
She was saying, it's better for you to kill me than to do this to me. Then after all the process, they shot her on her head, and she was crying of pain and dying like that. It pains me.
She didn't die right away?
Yeah, she didn't die right away.
How did you react to what was happening as they were bringing you there?
Oh, we have no reaction.
I understand why you had no reaction, that you were afraid they would kill you.
Yeah.
But how do you have no reaction?
I mean, when you turn all over, I mean, you see a gun pointing at you, I mean, you have nothing to do. Like me, I was just thinking it's better for me to die now.
They said, your weapon is your mother and your father.
Tamba Jimmy is also from Sierra Leone. He was kidnapped by the rebels, trained as a soldier when he was 11. They took him to the jungle to train. After 3 months, he tried to escape.
They caught me in an ambush. And they said, okay, you have planned
to escape. As a communication officer, we will give you something that you will never forget. You will not leave us to go to the town again because they will kill you sooner they see this gift on you, so they call it. That time I was marked.
Marked?
Do you want to see it?
That's up to you. What does that say?
RUF.
What does that mean?
Revolution United Front.
Did you ever try to escape again?
No.
Mohammed and his sisters did escape. They made it to a refugee camp in neighboring Guinea. Now they live here. With the help of a sponsor and the Anglican Church, they moved to Winnipeg 5 months ago. And it's time, Mohammed tells his sisters, to forget what happened.
Sometimes we talk and talk. Later, they become sad. I said, no, don't think about anything again. Here is a different place. You won't have a rebel here. What I want you to do now, think about how you will become in the future.
They are trying to pick up where their lives left off, every day taking a bus across town to a community college. They believe getting an education, becoming part of society again, will help them heal. But the memories they try to suppress assault them, reminders of who they used to be. Of the lives they lost. It's then that the full burden of what they're trying to forget comes tumbling out. The shootings, their parents' murder, and more.
We go with the rebels. They took us to their camp. They took us as their wife in the bush. We cook for them. We do everything for them.
Did they rape you?
Yeah.
Did it happen more than once?
More than once.
Tamba fights his own demons. He remembers the child he was, how his innocence was stripped away during those years in the jungle as a soldier.
I was asked only once to beat an old man who is even older than my father. I was forced to do it. I took the cane. I was flogging a man while I was still crying because I got sympathy for the man, but I have to do it because I don't want to die.
On their daily travels, the Touare's bus route takes them near this place. It's the Mount Carmel Clinic in Winnipeg, where stories like their own resonate.
I saw the bodies floating, and
I saw my friends and my family are killed in front of me.
I joined the army because I wanted revenge.
I still don't forget about what happened over there, and I just...
They beat him up and they shoot him. When he's dead, they cut him up like 2 pieces.
Sudan, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, their stories are brutal and brutally common. Having survived the wars, these former children now battle to survive their memories. Horror at what they've seen. Guilt at having been rescued. Ivan Sunaram works as a counselor here. He's met children who fled from conflicts all over the world, and he says many of them, now without any family, have no idea how to heal.
They come from countries in which these things are kept within the family. They come from countries in which you don't talk about psychological problems and illnesses. And so we talk about healing as opposed to, instead of using the word psychotherapy or counseling, we talk more about healing. And we say, how do you heal? And what we try to make kids recognize again, that there is a sense of beauty in life. And we try to help them to transcend some of the ugliness that they have seen.
Mohammed begs God to let him forget and instructs his sisters to do the same.
At any time she talks about that, she made me remember what happens to me, and particularly my parents. Like me up till now, that's why normally I spend much of my time in my room sleeping. Because I feel that when I sleep, I forgot about many things.
Would it help you, though, to talk about it? To talk to anyone about it?
I never say it to somebody. Maurice is the first person to say it to, and you are the second person.
The first time you've talked to anybody about what happened to you is when our producer talked to you a couple of days ago?
Yeah. We can't say that to another person because it's very shameful.
Even though people understand completely that it was not your fault.
Yeah, I always feel ashamed. I feel ashamed.
The sad reality for Tamba is that back in Sierra Leone, there is little sympathy for child soldiers. When he leaves Canada and goes back to the small village where he's been sent to school, he's afraid his identity as a rebel, marked with a scar, might become known.
My colleagues do not know that I've ever been into the jungle. Neither have been a rebel. And I won't want them to know. Whenever I go to play football, they all remove their shirts and be skinned. They will tell me, Tamba, remove your shirt. I said, no, I'm suffering from something.
Those who've worked with children like them say they'll only find themselves back in society when they find the courage to be around people again. Talking isn't imperative, but finding someone to listen is.
They will never forget. They've lost a lot. But their will to move on and carry on and become connected with people again, it is what makes them continue day after day. So when you ask me what we've learned, I mean, we've learned a lot in terms of people and their will and ability to survive. There is a heartbeat in these children waiting for someone to listen.
After a disastrous decade for children in war situations, there is some hope. A number of countries, spearheaded by Canada, are leading a campaign to make new international rules to protect children. The United Nations, too, is trying to bring pressure both on governments and rebel groups not to use children as soldiers. And that's all for News in Review. I'm Knowlton Nash. See you next time.